Hi everyone, it's me, Christina, here with Quilt Verve. So I want to say big thanks to everyone who has loved ribbons and bows so much. As a result, I've decided that it's time to get a quick tutorial going on to help you guys if you ever get nervous about cutting or sewing. I know that sometimes there's a little bit of anxiety there. So I'm going to do a quick tutorial. It's a really fun pattern. Ribbons and bows, if you all right, so here we go. Ribbons and bows, general cutting instructions. So here's my pattern, ribbons and bows. Here's my fabrics. Today I am using a Quilt Verve exclusive fabric collection called Flowers on Main. I designed and illustrated all of these fabrics. They're sort of 1930s inspired, but in brighter, more fun colors because I love pinks and emeralds and a little more vibrant, less of the primary colors. But Flowers on Main. And then I'm using 2 background skews. So all of fabric quantities and fabric usage is all going to be noted in your pattern. Number 1, so each of your fat quarters is going to be cut into a specified layout. And there's diagrams in your pattern so you can kind of see how those will work out. So we are going to you can figure out your fabric placement as noted. There's a fabric planner in in the very back. So if you want to just figure out what goes where, you can use that. But today I am going to start out with this guy, as this is used in my cut layout number 1. Here we go. All right, and here we go. So first fat quarter pressed nicely. And so within our diagram, so we're going to start as we do. And I like to fold everything in half because I like working with smaller cuts of fabric essentially. So I'm going to trim like strip number 1, and then I'm going to start with my second strip. All right, got my first 2 strips. And again, you have a diagram in the pattern because I'm so visual that I find that it helps me. All right, so now we are going to subcut my first strip. All right, so I have got my 6 sets of unit A for our cut layout number 1. So we set those aside, and then we will finish out cut layout number 1 by trimming our second strip to the specified length here. And we are actually going to leave it at the width of your fat quarter, so it will measure out the length of your fat quarter. So there we go, and that is unit C. So we've got 6 unit A's and 1 unit C, and we are ready to keep going. That is cut layout number 1. All right, here we go, cut layout number 2. So you'll do this for each of your fabrics specified for cut layout number 2, however you decide to do that. So here we go. Here's my nice pressed fat quarter. And again, start with my trimming and as a note, it makes pretty good use of this fat quarter. So cut carefully. Like that's all we got left. All right, then from here, we are now going to cut. So these will comprise 2 different units, your unit F and your unit G. So I like to do multiple things at once. So I am just going to align these bad boys up and then cut all 3 because they are exactly the same for cut layout number 2. So if you're looking at your pattern as you're watching this, you'll see why. It's going to make up my unit G. Unit G right here. I don't know. Just doing a quick double check because, sometimes. So that's my unit G right there, and then my unit F. And then I am just making sure that my straight edge is well aligned. All 3 layers look good. And then there we go. And now we've got our unit F. And that is how you do cut layout number 2. All right, and here we go. Pressed my fat quarter number 3 for cut layout number 3. So cut layout number 3 is a little different. So cut layout 3 is actually going to be used to make your final 3 blocks. And this helps minimize the amount of fat quarters you need. So that's why we did this. So this one, again, a little funny, but just follow the instructions. I promise it will all make sense when you start to put everything together and start looking at the different fabrics and how they're all used. But this one, again, goes to make up your block colorway 7, 8, and 9. But it is also used in block colorway number 1. So again, just look up closely. It'll all start to make sense. So cut layout number 3. All right. So cutting strip number 1. And again, you have diagrams of all of these things because that is how I like to work. Strip number 2, cover diagrams as well as your written measurements for each. All right, and again, that's all you got left. So cut carefully. Okay, so these are all going to be different. None of these are going to be exactly the same. So I'm going to set those guys aside, and then we are going to go strip number 1 and then do our subcuts. So this is going to also make up a unit F for a different portion of the pattern. So that is going to be unit F for your color 9, your colorway 9. All right, and then there is your unit F for colorway 9. And now we're going to take strip number 2 and we are going to cut for unit H. And then there we go. We've got 3 unit G's for colorway number 9. All right, and then there you go. And now we have our unit J. So you will have a unit F for block number 9, a unit G for block colorway number 9, and then you will have a unit H and a unit G for colorway number 1. And that is cut layout number 3. All right, and here we go. Here is my fabric for cut layout number 4. Now this is actually only used in color 7, 8, and 9. So this is your cut layout number 4. And again, I'm folding my fat quarters in half to make them smaller to work with because as you can see, I got a pretty small workspace here. So just trimming my edge, making sure that's nice and straight. And then I'm going to flip around and cut my strips. So I have my strip number 1, doing a check, making sure. And then we're cutting strip number 2. And then we got a little bit of this bad boy left over. So that is really all you're going to need for that. So a little bit left from that one. So a little bit of grace there. And then for this one, we're going to go ahead and cut our unit H. All right. And this is unit H for my blocks 7, 8, colorways 7, 8, and 9. So again, the block is all the same. It's just the colorways and however you choose to organize your colors. And it's actually really important that you keep your colors organized because of how they're sewn together. So that you'll see when we get to sewing why keeping track of what colors and what combinations you want to go together is so important. We're basically going to be sewing some strip sets and then trimming, and that will comprise each block component. So yeah, I'll show. We'll get there and you'll see it and it all makes sense. Feels a little bit like a mind game when you first start, but then once you get going, it all comes together and then it starts to make sense. All right, and then here we go. Here is my unit J for my colorways 7, 8, and 9. And then I'm just going to label everything. I've got my little labels over here, really important to help keep track. And that is your cut layout number 4. All right, and here we go. So now we're going to cut our background fabric number 1. And I've already kind of prepped my fabric a little bit, did my straight edge, and my sympathies to all of you who work in very small and tight spaces. I know it is such a challenge when you have to do these background fabric cuts. So yes, I've already like pressed, rolled, and folded in order to be able to do everything that I can to cut in a small space. So here we go, cutting my first set of strips. All right, first set of strips setting aside, and then I will continue on, unless some people like to do all their strips and then cut their do their subcuts. So for today, I'm going to cut all of my strips. So that is my first set of strips. And now I'm going to go through and start cutting my second set of strips. And then again, do a quick double check because you don't want to miscut. And now I am going to need a whole bunch of these bad boys. So I'm going to be here for a little bit trying to get all these cuts. So, all right, so finished cutting 7 strips of those bad boys. Here is my strips from cut number 1. And so now we are going to move on to the subcuts. So taking my strips and just cutting specified number. So then again, this is my strip number 1 from my background fabric number 1, and then just making my way through, cutting into some squares. And then again, we just keep going until we get to our specified number of squares. All right, finished cutting all of my squares. So this is our unit K. So, and I will get my label and I will be sure to label. And now we move on to subcutting our second strips from or with the fabric to make my unit E. Alright, and I am just going to keep cutting until I get to my specified number of cuts. And I am actually going to unfold my half, and then I'll cut these bad boys into another specified length, and I'm just going to keep going, cutting folded and then unfolding and cutting until I get to my number. Alright, and here are my last final strips. So finishing out with my unit E's for my background fabric number 1. So I have unit E and I have unit K, being sure to label everything. All right, and now we are going to cut our background fabric number 2. So I'm actually using a background fabric from Dear Stella. It is just their basic white background and their little dots. But so now we are going to start with our background fabric number 2. And then I'm going to cut my width of fabric strips. All right, so we got our width of fabric strips, and then we're going to subcut to create our unit B and unit D. So this one we are going to start cutting a bunch of small strips. So let's trim, and then so I am just going to measure and just cut till I end up with a huge number of these narrower strips. My unit B, and here we go. All right, so here's where it gets tricky. So I finished cutting as much as I could of strip number 1 to create my strips, and then I have to continue cutting those strips into my second strip. So you're gonna count how many you need. So make sure you're counting, because then we have to change how we're cutting. So we've got this one, this is our second strip. We finished cutting as much as we could, and then we are gonna finish out with what we have left. So I'm gonna keep cutting till I get to that specified number. In this case, it is 42. So we're looking for 42 of these strips. All right, so I just finished cutting my last strip here. And now from here, I'm now going to turn it this way, and then I'm going to finish cutting my strips. Okay, so now this is what's left over from my strip, from my width of fabric strips after I finish cutting my strips, my unit B, so set that aside. So this is what's left over. So from here, I am actually going to trim this to my length. So cutting, so see this one's a little shorter, and these are for some of those little ribbons that are in the pattern. So we trim that, and then we can finish cutting out our strips. So from here, I fold it in half because it's a little bit easier for me to see what's going on, and then I'm going to finish cutting for my unit D's. Do a quick count, make sure. So you can see I've got unit D, that's all of these. They're folded. And then I've got these, which are my Unit Bs. And now you have all of your background fabrics cut. So background fabric number 1, background fabric number 2.